Hi guys, Becky with Mildred's Umbrella again, and tonight we are talking with Elizabeth Seabolt Esparza. She is a company member with MU, and she has been you just turned it in, right? Your master's thesis?
Just put in my IRB application. So I'm still doing my thesis research.
Okay, but she is doing her master's thesis in counseling, and so we thought we'd bring her in to do a little background work on The Drowning Girls, which opens this Thursday. Woo, so excited. So how are you doing?
Great, thank you.
And you just got to see the show for the first time tonight.
I did.
What'd you think?
That was wonderful. It's beautiful. It's very sad. It's almost hard to find words to describe it, but it's beautiful, very evocative. Everything, the entire design, all the design elements come together really, really nice.
You guys we can't wait for you guys to see it. It's gonna be great. So tell us a little bit about your work in counseling and how it relates to the play.
Well, so I'm getting my master's in counseling psychology, and the clinical internship, which is part of my graduate school's requirements. My clinical internship that I did was at the Montrose Center, which is a center in Houston that services the LGBT community, but we also service people that aren't LGBT. But it's primarily an LGBT affirming center. And we also have an anti-violence program.
Okay, cool.
And so I did counsel quite a few people who had been victims of domestic violence. Matter of fact, the majority of people that would, especially when I would do one-on-one counseling with people, then I would also do intakes with clients that were coming in, and the majority of people that I did come across had been victims of domestic violence.
Is it that common in Houston?
Yeah, I mean, at least if I were to take the population that I came across when I was doing my internship there, if you were to take that population and then just apply it and look at that statistically, I would say that it is very common.
So you would say that The Drowning Girls, which is based on events that occurred 100 years ago in London, is relevant to us here in Houston today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of elements in the script that, especially when I was reading the script, that really stood out to me, that I remember thinking aren't that different from the way things are now. I mean, women now don't have to have a parent or a husband, sign off on things like opening a checking account or anything like that. So on that level, things are much different for women. But I don't think that domestic violence is something that has gotten better.
Yeah.
It's if it hasn't gotten worse, it is probably the same. There's
even over 100 years.
Even over 100 years. Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about the status of women in 1915? I mean, so we are dealing, like I said, this was 100 years ago. What were the lives of Alice, Bessie, and Margaret like? And how is that different today?
Well, then women really did, they were treated very much like children. They were, they stayed at home until they got married, and then when they found a husband, they were able to leave the home. But then often when they got married, they were still treated like children. What I find interesting is that and I think you pointed this out too, when they finally meet this man and get married, they view that as freedom. Right.
There's actually a line in the play where they hold up their veils and they're like, freedom!
Yeah, they think that this is freedom when the freedom ended up leading to their death.
Right. Well, there is a certain freedom in that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
Kind of makes you wonder what's better.
And how has that changed between then and now?
Well, now women, as far as a woman can buy a house on her own now. She doesn't have to have permission. A woman, if a woman.
So they weren't able to buy their own property.
Yeah, it was, or if they did, it was very unheard of. It was very unheard of for a woman to buy her own property, to open up her own checking account, adopting a child on her own. But now a woman can go into a bank and open a checking account without having to have her father or her husband's permission. I know it's. I mean, this
Because
was
we grew
even,
up in this time,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
for us to have to deal with something like that is like,
I mean, this
Are
was
you
as
serious?
recent as, I mean, my mother, I remember my mother telling me she wasn't allowed to open a checking account without a father or buy
how
a car.
long ago was that?
This was, I want to say, and I could be wrong, this was the early 70s.
Are you serious? What?
Mm-hmm.
I do know that.
That's crazy.
I do know my mom was not able to get her own credit card.
Yeah.
It had to be in my dad's name.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, she's the one who did all the bills and stuff, like settled everything. So
Mm-hmm.
not like he used it.
Yeah.
So things have changed, but at the same time, they're still kind of the same.
I feel
And the
like,
fact that they changed that was going on in the early 70s. I mean, what was 40 years ago?
yeah, it's not very. The other thing that I think though that is very similar to them and even now, I mean, you have women now who are choosing not to get married or deciding they don't want to get married as young as women did back then. But I think that pressure, I think we still send young women the message that marriage is the ultimate thing they don't
Cinderella.
want to do. It is, yeah, that your wedding day is the best day of your life. When are you going to get married? When are you going to give me grandchildren? It's, well, if you do this, you're not going to find a husband. We still tell women that now, which isn't that much different from the way it was then. I mean, when you read the script and then you see the production, you see that these women getting married, finally finding a husband was, it was
freedom.
Freedom. Yeah, it was freedom. It was a momentous experience. And I think the youngest character, I want to say, is 27? 26, which in that time period, that was considered old.
Well, and at the time, they were coming out of, I think, World War I. So there was actually a shortage of men. So there was a whole generation of women that were unable to attain that freedom.
Yeah.
So the fact that they were in a position to be easily taken advantage of.
Almost a sense of desperation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that you spoke about in our conversations before was the term gaslighting and how that applies to the play. Could you just explain what gaslighting is and what some of your thoughts are about it in the play?
Well, one of the things that you see happen, I keep pointing this way because the set's right there. One of the things,
It's beautiful, by the way.
It is. It's a beautiful
Thanks,
set.
Jody Bob. You're awesome.
But one of the things that, when I work with victims of domestic violence, one of the things that I saw here was the element of gaslighting and and I'm going to explain what gaslighting is, and then the element of he isolated his victims. He isolated each of them from their family, which made them more vulnerable to abuse. Gaslighting is a common technique that there's a particular psychological profile of an abuser where they use gaslighting, and it's usually something that abusive people who tend to have narcissistic traits will use. And it's basically convincing the person that they're crazy. So if you've ever seen the movie Gaslight, which is based on the play Angel Street, he gaslighted. Now we use it as a verb. Oh, he's gaslighting her. I mean, he gaslights her. He has her convinced that she is seeing things and going
But
crazy.
he literally is turning the lights down. And she's saying, why is it so dark in here? And he's like, no, it's not dark. But that's where the term actually comes from. It's from actually turning the gas down on the lights.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's applying that to more of a broader psychological attack.
Yes, it is. It is
Or
like a
someone's,
psychological
confidence,
attack,
really.
because if it's in a lot of abusive relationships, when the person points out that it's abusive, the abuser will have them convinced. It could be things like, you're being dramatic, you're being crazy, you're being a bitch.
Who's
you're
heard
the
that
abuser.
before?
Mm-hmm.
We all have.
Yeah. It doesn't even have to be physical abuse, it can be verbal abuse. No one will ever love you like I love you. No one will ever put up with you the way that I put up with you. And it's insidious. I mean, you can slowly convince the person that they deserve what's happening to them, or that it's totally normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an element of gaslighting. Feels like he did it more through the isolation from their family.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to remember parts in the script where with convincing them that they are sick and that they're having these.
Right, and then there's the scene with the doctors where the doctor wants to know what the husband said, rather
What
than
does your husband say?
rather than listening to Margaret
Exactly.
when she's the patient.
Which is another element of how women were treated very much like children, and not their thoughts and opinions were not always valid.
Right. And so you said that he isolates his victims. And how does that necessarily work in the structure, the overall structure of abuse?
Generally, and abusers usually do it because if they can isolate their victim from family or friends, they're isolating their victim from outside objective people who are able, because they're on the outside, can actually tell this person, this is not normal. What this person is doing to you is abuse. And by isolating them, I mean, it's a control thing. You isolate them, you have them more under your control. You're keeping them from an escape route, people who could help them.
Mm-hmm. And we actually do see that with his reaction to Alice's parents. When they categorically say, no, we don't trust this man, and he just whisks her away.
And then sends them a letter saying, your behavior, the way
your behavior is rude, or something of that nature. I don't
Oh yeah,
remember
he
exactly.
effectively isolated.
Yeah, and with Margaret, she didn't have anything. She had a sister, and that was it. So what would you say for today's audience? What would you say are the takeaways of this piece?
I think that there takeaways. I think plural is. I think because this is something that 100 years from now we still have this message that we are sending women about, and I know I sound like I'm saying that we need to stop telling women to get married. Marriage is
No, you're married.
I'm married, and I'm happily married.
Right.
But I was really lucky that when I was growing up, my mom did not stress marriage as this ultimate thing I had to do to be happy.
Right.
Marriage was never even really brought up. And when I started asking questions about marriage, my mom just kind of explained what it was to me. And it was presented as, if you ever decide that you want to get married, not when you get married, or, well, if you, don't wash your face, you're never going to find a good husband, just trying to remember.
Well, and like for me, growing up, my mom never really stressed marriage either, but because of that, I don't necessarily see the value in it. I'm like, if I'm going to get a tax break, I'll do it.
For me, it was like something like, if I meet that right person and it pans out that way, I would love to, but it was never on my bucket list. It was like, if I don't get married, I was very happy being alone, so it was not, and I didn't view not getting married as a failure or a letdown, or like I had missed out on something.
Whereas to these women, it's the be all.
Yeah, it is the end all be all. It is really as women the only thing that you can do to make yourself happy. So I think one of the things that's important is that we maybe stop telling young women. It's 2015. Let's stop stressing marriage as the apex, the top thing and then once you're up there, you're done. Let's maybe
next it's mom. After that, it's mom.
Yeah, or that too. I mean, we push these things on women, and I've seen women who've gotten married and they're not happy. They wanted a husband, and if you look at it, also when you're looking at gender parity and things, I mean, if women are going out in the world with this idea of like shopping for a husband, that's dehumanizing to men too, because men have become reduced to a wallet and a 401k and earning potential rather than human beings to share a life with.
Right.
So it's also good for men if we stop pushing marriage. I think that's one of the things is maybe start sending messages to young women that, here's some other things too. It's not just marriage that will
Yeah.
make you happy. And then I think the other thing, I think we still live in a culture where if a woman speaks about her experience being raped or being a victim of domestic violence or any kind of violence, we always want to shush and say, "Shh, you know what, that's too personal, it's a little too much information. Ooh, you know, we don't talk about that, it makes people uncomfortable." And that silence just keeps it going.
Yeah.
And these women, their voices were silenced, and this play, I think, gives them a voice, gives
Yeah.
the victim a voice
Yeah.
that they didn't get to have.
All right. Well, that about does it for us here. Do you have any last words? Famous last words.
So,
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for
Thank
sitting
you.
in with us. This is Mildred's Umbrella YouTube channel. Drowning Girls opens this Thursday, July 16th, 2015. Get your tickets now at mildredsumbrella.com. Bye, guys.
bye.